Okay, everyone is back. Um, just to reiterate what we went over right before the break, we have a set of questions that we have decided upon that were sent to board members that board members had opportunity to give feedback on. We are going to stick to those questions to be fair to each of the candidates. If there are follow-up questions, um, please ask follow-up questions that are related to the questions. As you know, we will have uh, 2 to 3 finalists that go on to the next round. And at that time, we will be more liberal and open with and detailed with and specific with the questions that we ask. But for now, to be respectful of the candidates, let's make sure that we are being fair to them and ask them and be able to assess the information on equal and giving them equal footing. So, having said that, we are going on to Dr. Severson, and Dr. Severson, if you want to come to the table, we welcome you. And I heard that, Severson.
That's okay. Good morning. It's been done before. Good morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you.
We're still at morning. Good morning.
Morning.
We're going to go ahead and begin. And before we begin, do you have any questions of us?
Maybe at the end, but I'm good to go.
Okay, very good. And I will start with the first question. And the first question is just tell us a little bit about a time when you had to make a difficult ethical decision in your leadership role. And what was the situation? What did you do? And what was the outcome?
The decisions I've made in my career have centered on the needs of all students. I would say during COVID, it was a very difficult time. And I was connected to the health department on a number of issues and topics. Not to bring everybody back to that time, but many parents came from different values and approaches of how we were handling the pandemic. And it was incredibly stressful for our students, for our staff. And I think the ethics of it were we got into the politics of the mask itself. It became a symbol, as we all can probably recall. And I worked really hard with parents to get them to understand that our focus was to open schools as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. And I believe it was one of the most difficult times that all of us had gone through. And at the same time, how do you protect your staff? How do you protect your students? And most importantly, how do you ensure that you get back on track? The ethics part was the different roles people in the community could play and how they approached this matter. And when you're meeting monthly with the health department and you're seeing those numbers that are extremely concerning, when you've lost a staff member during that time, when you go through some really significant pain, you want to ensure, number one, that you have your kids back. And during that time, I also was the chair of the United Way Board. and I served 3 counties at that time. And we did everything we could to ensure, for example, mothers had formula, they had food. Um, I guess everything I've ever done has been to champion those that were the most vulnerable, those that didn't have a voice. Um, and I would say it was a very difficult time just because of the way people leaned in and how I was hoping there would have been more hope that people came together. And I decided my background and my ability to care, um, I had to rise atop of all the politics and protect our students and staff, number one.
Thank you.
What is your vision for public education in Michigan over the next 5 years? And how would you ensure measurable improvement in student outcomes statewide?
Well, um, the top 10 that you have is very powerful. And the work that is taking place with literacy, letters, all these things are starting to align. You know, when I hear the numbers that you've been able to celebrate of how many students, how many teachers have now been trained in letters, um, it's really amazing. And you've done that by creating a shared vision as a board. It's not a mandate. I saw in the minutes, there was some reflection about how do we mandate something like this when we know it's very strong and powerful. So I see the ability to really connect with the work that we've done with our association, MAISA, the General Education Leadership Group that focuses on the coaching network. I see letters and the essentials working hand in hand to ensure that we get that part right. And I believe that literacy work that we've already started can continue to be aligned. For example, training elementary principals to be stronger instructional leaders is very key. Lining the coaches and the letters together. I would really be innovative to think, how could we create a space where there's an incentive to do this, but to align everybody to start working in that area of everybody having a shared vision for literacy, and we're very direct on what that means and what the processes are. For example, letters, having coaches come aside, working with principals to be instructional leaders. My whole career has been based on and had major gains in creating places where people come together for the betterment of the students. I will say the department is doing a phenomenal job in this area, and I think and believe that the ISDs and the superintendents would easily connect even at a greater level if I was in this position. And I see the state after going and working out in regions. I've been across the state and I've worked across so many different districts and regions. And I believe there's an ability right now to align things. But one of the most things that we have that is a challenge in the state that I believe that we really need to address as you look at the next 2 years is truancy. I think those numbers are quite concerning when districts can have 20 to 30% truancy and some as high as 50, 60%. If students aren't coming to school, they can't learn, right? So we need to look at this problem systemically, not just what schools can do, but what all we can do in the community. So my career has been based on relationships building with United Way, Goodwill, businesses. Businesses want great workers. We need to work with them on helping us. So there's an ecosystem part, but I think the direction you're going with literacy is very strong. And I think there's opportunities to make them even stronger. And in my role at MAISA, I've advocated to continue the letters funding, the coaching funding, the training for elementary principals, because I see that system. And I believe if we do that for the next 2 years, our ranking will get better, our support from teachers will get better, and we'll move the direction of the state in a positive way. Lastly, in the profile, there were comments from teachers about how do we train them and how do we lift them up. And I believe this is an excellent way, a positive resource. I would also say teachers are in a position right now where we need to attract. So while we attracting, we need to retain. So as much as we can do to help teachers in this movement, and I know that's been one of the goals of your top 10, is to ensure they're ready and they're supported so we keep the very best talent in front of our students.
Through the chair, can I ask a follow-up question? Um, You mentioned the mandates. How do you feel about the mandates? The possibility of mandating the letters training?
I support it. And I support it because of this reason. It's proven it's the science of reading. It's powerful. We have so many new teachers that need the very best training. This makes total sense. I also respect local control. I appreciate those things that districts do. I believe the 35M, the major investment in resources for literacy, is critical. And if you go across the state, there are areas that don't have curriculum directors, and I think there's a lean in for ISDs to even do greater work to support the department. But I believe it should be mandated to some degree, and it should be incentivized if possible.
Thank you. I have the next question. Deep educational and systems experience. How has your experience as an educator informed your approach to system-level leadership? Share an example where your teaching or educational leadership experience influenced a district or state policy.
Could you say it again, please?
This question is a deep educational and systems experience question. How has your experience as an educator informed your approach to system-level leadership? Share an example where your teaching or educational leadership experience influenced a district or state policy.
I would say throughout my career, every place I've worked, I have structured the system for the achievement of students. What you saw in my resume tells a story, a compelling story to create places where kids can learn. So as an example, when I was a K-12 superintendent, I came back, as you see in my resume, to Harper Creek. I was there for 10 years. And working with the staff, we worked on standard-based grading, which is a very strong system. It's to ensure students complete courses and pass courses, and we got the dropout rate down to about 2.5% without an alternative ed. The systems approach, though, was to bring everybody together to create a shared vision that no student will fail. And before I get to the state level, sometimes as a leader, you have to lead without the outside telling you what to do. And my experience from the days of being an alternative ed director and working with some of the most at-risk students in the urban center, I learned that I needed to create this environment where all students could succeed. And in that, we created new coursework, new offerings. We increased over 40 classes for our kids because we wanted them to be engaged. And when that dropout rate happened, our dual enrollment increased, our AP was added. So I want to be clear that while we're talking about a system in education, I've had these experiences that I believe I can replicate in other areas. In regards to state policy, recently we were able, as association working with the superintendents, to generate over $100 million in consolidation funds. And those funds were designed to be systematic approach to all across Michigan to help children. As an example, about $47 million was for fiber optics. It was to connect all those places in Michigan that did not have a fiber connection to the network. We created a data lake that we just got national recognition. And what the data lake will do will allow us to place all the data in a very safe and secure environment where it can be pulled in real time with our best practices, our strategy bank, MyKIP. It got national recognition because we were innovative. And I think that detail of just that one event shows when you put everybody together for a shared vision for students, and not just to make a data lake, but to ensure that the materials and the things that we pull from it will help students succeed. And we were only able to do that with a number of people working together, with superintendents working together, ISD leadership. MDE has been part of this work all the way back to the data hub. So with that work, we're looking to align curriculum in everywhere we can. So lastly, going back, I would also say I raised proficiency tests significantly when I was a principal. I did it as a high school principal, I should say. I've done it as a superintendent by increasing number of students going to college. 2009, 63% of my students had a certificate, associate's degree, or bachelor's degree. It was in the top 25 in the state for principals. For K-12, and was very proud of that.
Thanks. Thank you. Please describe a specific initiative that you've led that addressed educational inequities or closed opportunity gaps. What data or feedback informed your approach, and what were the results?
One more time.
Describe a specific initiative you've led that addressed educational inequities or closed opportunity gaps. What data or feedback informed your approach, and what were the results?
I've had a number of them. I want to give one that's close to my heart. I helped open up an alternative education program for students, middle school and high school students that were not going to graduate. They were sent from 5 different districts to a school that we started basically from scratch that's still going on today. The initiative that we worked on was focused on standard-based grading practices, where we looked at the standards and we set up programming for every student individually to ensure they met those standards. Many of the students that came to that program needed a lot of wraparound services, which we were very much tied to the community, to nonprofits. But what we found that was most important was building relationships. I would say it's my greatest strength is to build strong relationships to move people in a positive direction. And that school had some really difficult students. We had students on probation, we had homeless students, we had students that many times were so hungry when they came to school that they just needed someone to care about them. And the alignment of working in those standards and being creative at the same time, we had amazing success. As an example, we started to have kids pass the MEP. This is back in the MEP days. And there were people that thought, what are you doing there? There's no way these kids could be successful. And my whole approach to students in the state is we view them as assets, not deficits. And I didn't have anybody at that school other than an amazing staff to look at what we could do, how we could individualize programming. So eventually we had kids going to a tech center. We had kids job shadowing. We connected with a community college. I thought outside the box in every occasion. Did that the same at Portage, where I got in alternative ed 20 kids dual enrolled at Davenport University, students that people didn't believe they could be successful. I helped pass a promise in a community where everyone was included, charters, private schools, public schools, where people believed we couldn't do it. And the goal was always about every student graduating college and career ready. And the way I approached these systems was working with community, working with business, every group I could connect with. And so when you look at my resume, there's a number of successes I've had. And I would say every one of them has been designed in a systems approach, but it's more importantly been built on creating shared vision, having trust, and being so driven and passionate to ensure every student succeeds.
Thank you. Follow up?
When we're talking about educational inequities and closing opportunity gaps, we have a situation where foster care students, they go from family to family, school to school, and the transcripts often don't follow them. We've had testimony about that. And so they don't graduate, or they have problems graduating because they can't prove they've taken courses. They also, parental authority, or the biological parents, the rights of them to be able to understand what's going on with their child, their biological child at the different schools, doesn't necessarily follow when they transfer to different schools. So if you're selected as the state superintendent and this board directs you to solve this issue, whether it's creating an ombudsman for foster care students, maybe it's a half FTE or whatever it is,
Yeah.
where we can just get this solved, would you commit to doing that in a reasonable time?
Absolutely. Once again, these are the children that have no voice. And when I was in Muskegon Area ISD, we had teachers that we employed at the juvenile center. And we were working with the schools when they were released to help them come back into the school, not behind. And part of the problem is when they come back in, if we don't align them right away or the school doesn't align them right away, they're already behind and many times they won't pass their courses. And so I learned that firsthand all the way back when I was a alternative ed teacher in Allegan, my initial days, because we had students on probation and some of the goals were to get some of them back to the high school. We had some that would graduate with us and that was okay. But yes, I would easily support that. In fact, our association and the technology we have, we believe we can do that even better. We're already starting to align those systems to ensure that we can forward that information as quickly as possible. Our data hub right now actually has what's called a snack pack. It's a small snapshot of a student that can transfer very quickly instead of the old CA60s process. But I think there's going to become more opportunity, especially with the data lake, to focus on that issue. There's also another area that's very similar. So we have students that move in Head Start from place to place and GSRP and parents that are moving to find employment. There are opportunities, and we're working on those now, to allow that data and that information. For example, if a child is receiving special education services, we ensure that that information carries to the next district so that district knows where the student is coming from and how to follow them. But I understand that problem because a lot of my career is with high at risk. And yes, I would be committed to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that leads kind of into our next question. My background is juvenile justice and special needs.
I read that.
So, could you please share with us a time in your career where you had to respond to a group or a community that felt unheard or marginalized in some way? And could you tell us your approach in that scenario or situation? And then what, if anything, did you learn from it? Or what were your takeaways?
So responding to a group, you're saying,
Or
that
a
felt they weren't
community.
heard?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to answer it this way. I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I've been a champion in this area for a long time. So I'll give you an example. In Muskegon Area ISD, we had a phenomenal Great Start collaborative, and we brought in foster parents, grandparents. We brought in as many voices into this room. I believe we had 80 partners in Muskegon Area ISD. And part of that was being visible, going to different schools, listening to the community. And one of the biggest pieces I've prided myself on is being inclusive, which means really bringing all the voices in the room and ensure that the times that maybe were the hardest and challenging, I would say, in the alternative ed inner city, when parents didn't feel they weren't heard for many years. Some had not been successful in school. School was not a good place for them. And I worked incredibly hard to build trust with those parents and felt that the work that we did and the culture that I've always instilled with my staff was to ensure every voice is heard. I don't have a group that I can specifically say that was angry at me or the school district because I did as much upfront work to ensure they felt welcomed. And school needs to be welcomed for every student. And when they feel welcomed and the parents know that, um, usually don't have too many problems.
Thank you.
Next question deals with communication. Describe a situation where your communication style helped resolve a conflict or build trust across a diverse group of stakeholders.
Well, first off, you have to have trustworthy relationships, and you need to be listening to as many voices as you can and connected to as many people as you can. I would say when we were first working on the Muskegon area promise, there was a belief that this would only be for a certain group of students. And part of a promise is to really communicate a vision for everybody to be part of that promise. And that was so important for us because we felt that in the community, there may be folks that felt they weren't in the room or students that didn't have a GPA at the time to be able to get to the promise. And I remember having a conversation with a judge in Muskegon about how are you going to make this work so people feel they're included and they have that opportunity. And so much of what we communicated, we decided was to start right at preschool. So we communicated through a number of grade levels of what it meant to go to college. And we knew we had to do that starting then because we had to grab everybody. We had to grab grandmothers, foster parents, parents, guardians, all along the way. And then we had to get the community involved. And depending on the person that you were talking with, if I was talking about this with business, I was talking about building talent. If you go to Muskegon today, it looks so different. And I can imagine it's even going to get better because of the numbers of students now who are meeting meeting the need, and we're meeting the need to get them to the promise. But I would say the communication style was developed to be at every level. So from preschool, kindergarten, all the way through all the grades, parents knew they were communicated to. And the last thing we did to ensure that we did a phenomenal job was we hired a inclusion person from our staff to go out for those students that might have some areas that would be very difficult for them to be able to get to a promise. And we worked with the schools to ensure that that person of support. So we found that many times students graduate and they needed one more person to help them make it to college. And so we hired that person through our promise to ensure that would happen. But there were a group of people that felt that they might not be in the room. And it was really important for us to communicate, yes, you are, and to build that trust and to work with all partners to ensure that would happen.
The next question relates to the politics of the position. Michigan's political landscape is complex. Tell us about a time when you advanced an educational policy or initiative in a politically sensitive context. How did you build support while staying focused on students? Who was the opposition? And how did you work with them? And if you want me to repeat that, I can.
That'd be great.
Okay. Tell us about a time when you advanced an educational policy or initiative in a politically sensitive context. How did you build support while staying focused on students? Who was the opposition? And how did you work with them?
All right, I'm going to give you the honest, straight up answer. The toughest one I've had to deal with was dyslexia. Um, we agreed with the approach. What we were looking at was to change a little bit of the language because we just wanted to ensure that it would be delivered. And this came from not just me; it came across the state that we want that language to be as best written as possible to ensure that we could deliver on it. And some of this has been over my career. We pass language sometimes without the resources. And I feel we have to get away from over-promising things and under-delivering them. It's unfair to the families and students. And we testified, a few of us testified, and it was really hard for me because I believe in all of this work. I believe in all of it. But it was about, could we change a little bit of the language? We just wanted to be in the room to talk about that, talk about how we could utilize the literacy coaches and come alongside MDE and all the work that's been done. And some language was changed, and we felt very comfortable with those changes. And the outcome of that was immediately, I talked to my staff and said, we need to start drafting the guidance right now. I want you to bring in the top curriculum leaders in the state. I want you to work side by side with MDE, and I want you to start working on guidance so we can be prepared when this will happen. I'm sharing something with you that was incredibly difficult for me to do in my career. The whole purpose, though, was to change some of the language so I could ensure that I met the needs of the students. And I believe now we are in a phenomenal place with the department, with the ISDs that are going to help lead this work and support you, and most importantly, support our kids. And I feel we brought a resolution to it with a solution. And sometimes when you work on bills, and I've done this now for about 11 years, especially in this last role, I work across the aisle. I look at those areas that we can find commonality. Work very closely with your liaisons here at MDE, with the lobbyists across the state, with every region represented in legislative work, so all 10 regions with MASA. That work has been phenomenal. Looking at what the legislation is, describing some potential solutions to make it better, always stem from ensuring the kids get the best supports across Michigan. So.
Follow? Talking about political sensitive context and kind of advancing or continuing policy, currently there's videos connected with MDE instructing teachers and administrators how to hide in the computer systems or as report cards go home or at parent-teacher conferences that children are using different pronouns at school, being, different names, and maybe going to different bathrooms and locker rooms than their biological assign. Mm-hmm. And I even know a couple of Lansing former kindergarten teachers who left because they were told that they have to ask the kids what names and genders they want as kindergartners, and also that they couldn't tell the parents that this was going on. So back in 2022, these videos, Governor Whitmer, who was running for re-election, condemned the videos. But currently, the current superintendent continues to defend them. And I'm just asking you if you will work to stop these and any other efforts to deceive or withhold important information from parents about their children.
Let me begin with this. It's been fascinating how polarized we are on some of these topics when we have kids not even coming to school. And my focus would be to look at what you're sharing with me, because I haven't seen those videos, to be perfectly honest. But everything I've done is to ensure every child feels welcome and wanted. I've also communicated at a high level with parents to ensure that they feel supported and they are the number one teacher. I get that. But the problem we have right now, I believe, that's becoming a crisis is that we're looking at outliers that aren't changing the impact of what's happening in the classroom. And yes, there may be cases, left or right, that go too far, that we have to bring them more to center. I get that. I fully do. But the reality, when I see kids coming to school hungry, maybe not having the right clothes, or the question you asked earlier, do they have their grades to get to where they need to go, is going to become a much higher priority for me. But I go back to all the diversity, equity, inclusion is everybody needs to feel welcome. So this room is very diverse. It's very diverse. Your backgrounds, I read your profiles, they're very different. You have great experiences, right? The profile you did, you ensured everybody was included in that profile, right? Every voice was heard in that profile. And what did it say was one of the most important things? Student-centered. That was a home run. I mean, when I read that and looked at it and analyzed it, at the end of the day, I said, isn't it about the students? In fact, you know what's interesting is in that profile, the only thing I would have expanded on was to increase student voice. So what do our kids say? So I've been part of Kent ISD has been doing an engagement survey across the state, gathering students' voices. How do they feel in school? How do they feel supported? Which is very critical, because if they're not coming, something's happening. And capturing that voice to remove as many barriers as possible is key. You're fine, I'm sorry.
I'm asking the next, is that it? Anybody else have any? Okay. I'm asking the next one. Collaborative, this is about collaborative research building. Give an example of how you built and sustained a successful partnership with a group, example, unions, families, tribal nations, legislators, and what evidence can you share that made it successful? Let me ask you.
Partnerships.
Built and sustained a successful partnership with a group.
I talked about the promise, so I'm going to pivot from that one, but that included everybody, business, nonprofits, Rotary, you name it. They were in the room to make that happen. So that was highly successful partnership. But I'm going to give you one that is really important to me. One of my goals working as an ISD superintendent was to ensure all children were ready for kindergarten. And in that work, you need strong partnerships. So Great Start Collaborative was one of those. But what we found, the gap of children in poverty and the word exposure that they see is a huge deficit. And so we established a number of partnerships to focus on ensuring every child, birth to 5, had books at home with a message about read early, read often, and building capacity and relationships with parents to ensure parents recognize that we valued them right from the beginning. In my resume, it talks about we went from 30,000 books using 15 partnerships. Basically, at the beginning to the end, we were over 130,000 books. Very powerful. And what came out of that was a strong relationship with business, because they wanted and they believed all children should be ready for kindergarten. And United Way, Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And we aligned those partnerships to ensure that we are across the board serving all children. The last one that came along was we had a visit from the Clinton Foundation that came to Muskegon, because we are working with Goodwill. And so when parents came in, there were books for them. as well with a search in the shopping area for their students, their children to go through, right? And the vision was all children ready for kindergarten, create a shared vision. We wanted every child to have books because we knew if they didn't have books in their home, there was a larger gap, research-based, right? Building relationships with parents, building relationships with multiple entities, to the point where if a child was taken from a home, we developed kits that had books included and a bear, teddy bear, to try to show there were people that cared for our children. So it was an amazing feat because, look, you got the whole community to believe. And when you can get a shared vision at that level, for example, if we said in Michigan, we're going to have a day that we're going to say it's set on literacy across the state, our one PD day that we do it all together with a department, with the ISDs, with the LEAs, that we focused full bore at this, right? A full day. And this is another group that we want in that room so everybody feels included in that process, our early childhood folks, right? So I'm very proud of those partnerships that we've made at Muskegon Area ISD. I had birthed to 26 special needs students. We were very focused on supporting them every way possible so they could be ready for kindergarten as well. We know the research suggests that if we do a really strong job early on, it really makes a difference when they come to kindergarten, right? And sometimes people at K-12 could forget that because they look at they got them, right? And I'm like, we got them at birth. We should do everything to support those that need the most support so they're ready.
So the next question is from me. And if you could describe a situation where you faced significant resistance or criticism from an important stakeholder, how did you handle it? And what principles guided your actions?
One more time.
Looking at a situation where you face significant resistance or criticism from an important stakeholder group, and how did you handle it? And what principles guided your actions?
What I remember that was kind of difficult was I was working with high school staff focused on Collins writing, which is writing across the curriculum in all subjects, including PE. And there was quite a bit of resistance to that. And during that time, the MEP test was the primary test, and the state gave out practice tests. And I convinced my staff, all of them, to take the MEP practice test. And when they got to see all of the difficult questions and the importance of writing, it was a game changer. Now they knew, right? And so for those English teachers, I would tell them, you can't do this alone. We have to work across. We have to use this methodology. Our writing scores went up significantly, by the way. But I came alongside those teachers that struggled a little bit with this. So I'm gonna give you an example. I remember to this day, PE teacher says, why would I need to do writing? Why am I doing this? And I said, what's the most important thing that you do in your class? What do you want your students, after they have PE, to come out and be? And he says, I want them to be good sportsmen, of course. I said, have them write about it. Let's see what feedback you get. Let's see if you've taught them the importance of being a good sport, right? And I think what happened was showing the urgency of the score, but creating a condition where people felt empowered to try something new, right? And I look at MDE department. You have some amazing people here I've worked with. I would even empower them to a higher level. I would look at the attributes they have, where they could lean in more, how we could build more relationships across the state. I think and believe the relationship piece is incredibly powerful. I'll also say lastly, if there is a debate on something that can be negative, I'm going to fall on the sword for the kid, for our students. That's most important. The politics will always be there. Uh, but if you're doing something because you believe it's right for students, I would rather face that person in the mirror than somebody else.
Chair. You mentioned how MDE staff could lean in more. MDE staff is stretched. So what would you do to assist with that?
In my 3 years in this position, MAISA has grown from 10 to 40 staff with multiple legislative projects. And I want more partnerships. And I believe with the people you have in this room, I could build that relationship and show we want to work side by side with you. If we're showing something that's really important, I want them next to our person telling that. I want this group to move more away from compliance and more from service. And the only way we can do that is bring people more together. As an example, this is a tough one. We need to be more in Lansing together. We can't do all these things on Zoom anymore. Sure, there's some where because of distance, it's really hard. But we need people in rooms to build relationships, to build trust. And you can't do all those things on a Zoom. You just can't. And that doesn't mean everything has to happen that way. But I also really studied this and thought about it. I know many of the staff you have because I've worked with them directly and indirectly on a number of projects, and they're really great people. What I've done in my career has been able to establish a working environment where people want to come to work, they're excited about to work. There's no way to expand an ISD from 280 to almost 500 without leaning in spaces and not have openings, because I've built a culture where everybody feels incredibly valued. And part of what I think what needs to happen is we have to let them do more of their job, and we have to move more to the service end. I've also thought about this. I really believe that there needs to be a change in MIPSers, so that if someone's in the field and they're 25 years in and they want to come to MDE, they can, because they're concerned about losing their retirement and coming to an end. And so there's a lot of talented people that would come alongside the staff here. I also know you've had times where you've had 50, 60, 70, 80 openings at one time. So something has to be reviewed again of why there's such a stopgap to hire people as quickly as possible. I don't have that solution. I'd have to look at that. But those are things that are really critical, because when we talk about short staff and resources, the reality is most likely some of our systems are a little clunky and we need to fix them. And I have some ideas with that coming from a place where we were quick to expand programs, develop programs, HR systems, onboarding, opportunity to really look at gathering staff voice. So one other piece of this is your departments do amazing work. In a listening tour, I would spend a lot of time with departments, but I would cross-departmentalize those conversations to ensure I'm capturing, all voice. I would look at fiscal monies. I've done a very good job with the people I surround myself with on how we're handling our funds, how we're meeting the return on investment on legislation, how we're measuring those pieces. I would use third-party people to tell us how we're doing. I would do surveys of people in the field to say, hey, you're doing this well, we need help here. And I'd really try to narrow that focus down as much as possible. And I've kind of talked about it earlier. Truancy, EWIM systems, best practices, literacy focused, and graduation rates, wrapping it all together.
I'm going to pivot to literacy. The state of Michigan legislature has enacted a multifaceted literacy law, which is meant to directly assist children, particularly those in pre-K through third grade, with improving their literacy skills. Please share with us your impression and knowledge of these bills. And as state superintendent, how would you lead the department, ISDs, RESAs, and local districts in implementing and monitoring the effects of these laws? Additionally, could you tell us what part, if any, that you played in informing or providing support for these laws prior to their enactment?
That's a good question. So what I'm going to leave with you today is our Section 35 annual report that displays the work we're doing with the coaching network. So it's the only artifact I brought, I promise. But it's inclusive of the work with MDE, the coaching network. We this year got nearly every ISD to contribute all of their coaching data, which was a first. And we're showing in that work that where a coach is involved and where letters is involved, we're seeing growth on local assessments. And I see that work, as I shared a little bit earlier, continuing as well. PA 147, the guidance that was written, a lot of our folks felt to step in to start looking at the dyslexia bills and what we're going to need to do to meet that challenge. And what I've been able to do, and for the benefit and the support of all of our ISD leaders, is we have an extremely powerful general ed leadership network, GELN, that I see working closely with the state superintendent and this department to synergize on the most important things together, our messaging, our coordination, and our assurance that we're lining up all of the best practices to ensure students are successful. Within here, we have teacher reflections, student reflections, parents reflections. We are connected to Detroit Public TV with work, so we can get children ready in a number of programs there. We have EduPass, which has thousands of participants who took online to keep their certification, which tie right into the literacy essentials. We have all our literacy coaches now trained in letters. So I understand the foundation of that really well. I also understand we're in different places in the state, and I believe there's opportunity with the MDE staff, the GLN staff, SEILN special ed staff to ensure that all children are included in that, that we could work together. So I will leave this with you, and it's got a lot of bright pictures and graphs and such, but it's a real celebration of the time we've been involved with 35A, the literacy coaches, and the work that we've done. And we know that all of you have supported the coaching work. You've added coaches. We focused on areas that needed the most support. It's critical. And there's also an update in mathematics, which was tied to a 23H line item that you're involved with as well to ensure that we're supporting math as well. And our first target was those districts that had the lowest scores.
I have a follow-up question in relationship to literacy and funding that we're asking every candidate, especially as it relates to implementation long-term. So school funding in Michigan is one of the most difficult models to understand in the nation. Michigan residents have communicated frustration with understanding where money comes from, where it goes. $87 million were allocated for the literacy changes our state needs in the last budget. 550 school districts applied for these dollars. MDE approved local school district budgets and selected successful applicants for the entirety of the $87 million and released the list of districts. Do you support the required reporting of approved budgets for categoricals and grants to local citizens so they can see line item spending themselves?
I'm comfortable with it because the taxpayer is in, they entrust us to deliver. And everything I've done has been focused on what is that return on investment. I also think we need to come along with service and support as well. Because there are areas in the state that don't have large staffs, reporting staffs. There might be opportunities for ISDs to lean into this space and help with that reporting. Um, but I will say, we have a large investment, and when I look at this document where it wasn't mandated to share the data, and we've got people doing it now, I believe we create that shared vision of why it's important to do that. Look, when you receive that kind of funding, and you want to go back to the legislators for more, you want to go back with a story to tell what you did and how you've improved things, right? And numerous opportunities, and I've seen this through ISDs, lead the way in that work. I'll give you another one. Cybersecurity um, funding at first was going to be designed that would go as block grants, and ISDs came along and said, what if we could do this for the whole state and protect servers and come with a program that would ensure everybody was covered, right? And it came out of some strong leaders in Ingham who connected with legislators to tell a story and a vision with a solution that could get us there. And now we're extremely successful with that work. We have data we can show. We created the annual report for that as well, and we have submitted it to show areas in the state that we're meeting that need. So I think in the same case, another piece would be that we have to also, if we're going to ask for more resources, here's one to consider. If there is a timeline to get information out and projects out and grants approved, we should have more resources to ensure the quick turnaround of that. I believe the department is very thin in that area. They're doing their very best. And I just have to be very frank, that's a stopgap when you can't get money out quickly because people move on or you might lose a principal. It's not the intention of the staff. It's just the reality when you are, as Mr. McMillan said, when you're thin in resources, that's what happens.
Thank you.
The next question is about authentic, humble, and being authentic, humble, and trustworthy. Leadership often involves acknowledging mistakes. Share an instance where you changed your mind based on new information or feedback. How did you communicate the change, and what did you learn?
Um, I really work hard to include every voice, number one, and that's important up front. So if I give you an example, maybe in real time with the staff here at MDE, if given this opportunity, I would not come in with a perception I have all the answers, nor would I come in with the degree of thinking I can fix everything without them. And that's being humble, and that's building trust right off the very beginning to understand where people are at. One of the alternative eds I worked in, I was probably moving too quickly on curriculum. The staff didn't feel prepared. And partly I saw such an urgency that I was moving too quick. And so I sat down with the staff and shared my frustrations, but my apologies in that I overextended them and didn't realize that they were in a position of already feeling overwhelmed. And it taught me from that point on to really take some time and listen to where people are at. Um, my current staff is now taking huge initiatives. They're involved in so many projects. And I actually now tell them to slow down, take it easy. Let's make sure we get everything right. And I learned from that experience that you have to build trust and relationships. And I also believe that if given this opportunity, we in this position really need to survey the people around us to see how are we doing. We might have perceptions that everything is okay, and in reality, it might not be. I read the governance study, and that hit home to the bigger question, right? And first thing I thought, why was this study done? I always want to understand where did it come from and why. But I support the Constitution. I support how you were elected. I support the ability to be bipartisan, working together for all of our students. And I think there's some things in here that were really strong, though. Building the allegiance with ISDs may be greater. The SRFC, special education funding. There's some great points in there. But how I connect this is, as a board, you're the voice and vision for the state as well. And how shared vision comes together in my 21 years of working with so many different boards is you have to come to a shared focus and vision, because everybody wants you to, and they want you to be connected to all of our students. And as a leader, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But one of my greatest strengths is relationships. It's getting really smart people quickly in a room to solve problems and ensuring I hear their voice, because they see many times that problem different than me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How have you, and thank you again, how have you integrated the arts, mental health supports, or social emotional learning into the educational experience? And how do you define success beyond test scores?
So you said arts, mental health, what was the other one?
Mental health supports or social emotional learning. And how do you define success beyond test scores?
So I grew up in an opera house. So my mom sang in 5 languages, and I played classical piano for a number of years. And so I had the music piece and was in band. But I'm going to tell you a story. When in one of the districts I was in, when I came back, we had a marching band of, I think, about 20. And it was a Class B district. And that was really concerning to me because I was a music person, and to see that. And so I worked with the schedule. Schedule was a problem. Kids couldn't take music until 7th grade unless they came in a special bus early in the morning. So I created 5th and 6th grade band to get us there. And it took years to build that. When I left, I think we were over 80, but we also now had a jazz band of 20 in high school. We had an honors choir that traveled actually to Canada, across the United States. That was phenomenal. Because of my passion for music and recognizing the creativity, it's been throughout my career. The aesthetic learning that we did with alternative ed students in Portage, where we had artists coming from, artists that were coming to the school to work with the students on their art and get them to write about their art and be creative. And creativity comes from art and music. It's so valuable. I would never cut it in school, number one. I would find any way to keep music. In regards to mental health, my whole career has been focused on mental health. Uh, my beginning of mental health was an understanding because my dad was head of child abuse and juvenile delinquency for a county. And I grew up understanding, before it was really used, the term ACEs, um, back when I was an alternative ed teacher and principal, and creating supports all the way through, and carried that everywhere I went. As a superintendent at Harbor Creek, I personally mentored 25 students that were on the line to drop out. That's why we got, part of the reason we got the dropout rate there. Worked very closely with them. And at Muskegon Area ISD, we went from 3 to 23 mental health clinicians. We had interconnected systems framework. We brought in a cross-section of, when we did school safety, we had school safety combined with mental health in the same room to talk about the health needs and the connections. And we worked really closely with Mr. Scott Hutchinson here on a number of projects, continued that through all the way to engagement, surveys, and then currently we are leading the work of Trails, which is the training across the state in numerous schools. We have a coordinator that ensures those things are being met, the timelines are being met, and people are trained. But I'm glad you brought up arts because arts will always be a foundation of who I am and my background.
All right. If selected for this opportunity, you would have the dual role of state superintendent and the board chair. How will you ensure all members' voices are heard and, when possible, included in key decisions? And there's a second part to this. Could you please share a couple examples in where you successfully managed conflicts among one or more board members, or between yourself and a board member, and if never a board chair, a similar structured executive body?
So conflicts and all voices are heard primarily.
Conflicts. Yeah, how will you ensure that all members' voices are heard and included in key decisions? And then could you share some examples in where you successfully managed conflicts among board members and then maybe yourself and a board member?
Well, as I stated earlier, the focus will be always to ensure all students succeed. So that's my foundation to get that shared vision. What I would look at with the board here is, I read your profiles. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of intersection. Where can we work on the intersecting parts? So I haven't spent a lot of time with you, so I'm not, getting into that area. But I would look at where could we build that relationship. I hear literacy very powerful. I hear parents being involved in their children's education, and the well-being and equity is a big piece, right? In my ISD work for 8 years, we synergized on a common approach and a common way to receive updates from me, to answer questions, to call board members individually. If given this position, I would do that in my first 90 days, to spend time with each board member to hear about their aspirations. What do they see moving forward as a state? I would look at where the commonalities are and to continue to remind myself who's in that room and to appreciate all of your individual histories and your practice. K-12 superintendent for 10 years, which is pretty good standard nowadays, right? Went through a variety of board members, some that, I'll give one, some didn't appreciate school of choice students coming to the district. They felt that we should focus on our kids. I totally disagreed with that because they were my students. Once they were accepted, they were my students. They weren't going to get a label. And I worked with that board member. But once again, I could not move away from what was right. And I believe what was right was ensuring that student felt supported all the way to the top, and that we did that as a board, as the board would do. But creating shared vision was probably the strongest strength that we were able to do because, for example, when you're focusing on standard-based grading and dropout rate, right? There's sometimes advanced students or parents might feel, are we not in this circle, right? Are we not, you're putting a lot of time here. And what I was able to do though was add 2 new AP courses because I didn't have to cycle so many through and repeat courses. And once they could see why this was important, lifting all boats, it made a difference, right? K-12, I worked really hard during a recession where we didn't have a lot of money um, with the unions. And I worked extremely hard to keep a sound budget and to keep as many staff employed. We rarely laid off any staff. And in that time, I will tell you, I had 3 grievances in 10 years. And I pride myself by meeting with the union, by having these conversations, which does impact the board, right? So the shared vision is a great part. My foundations from my first years of teaching and understanding the vulnerability of our students is always my belief. And my 8 years at Muskegon ISD was amazing. Amazing staff, amazing board, focused on all children birth to 26 with high needs, CTE, all of it, extremely supportive. So I think doing the work up front is the key in that, is the listening to hear why someone is coming from that point of view. But I instilled the work of, championing our students. And it's relationships. It's just getting out and talking to folks. I would say in this role, one thing I would do in that regard that might help just on perception would make it the norm that you're out across the state, not an event. Make it a norm. Just everybody, the staff here too. We got to get back to that again where we're out in districts and we're capturing those voices. That's really critical. I think that builds the will and the trust. And I would tell you, the associations I work with are amazing. They would lean in this space. They would help us even more. And I would count on them as they bring problems. I would ask for solutions. And how can we do that together, which takes pressure off this entity itself. So
All right.
hungry, it's right at lunch.
Yeah. Next question deals with strategic priorities. Having reviewed our strategic plan, please share what you believe are the 3 top priorities and tell us how you will energize both internal and external stakeholders to achieve them. And are there other priorities that we should consider if we decide to review and revise the current plan?
Well, that's one piece of paper I did bring today. So thank you for that question.
Sure.
The plan is very strong. The hardest part is the communication of it. When we talk about top 10 of 10 and 8 goals, it can get muddy out there, just so folks understand. That's from being a K-12 soup, ISD superintendent, association superintendent, or executive director. When you have this many goals, when you come out to measure them and talk about them, they're all critical. I'll say that. They're all critical and important. But I would lean in and look at where could you make your primary focus on? We talked a lot about literacy today. Literacy, wellness, oh, they should all be intertwined. We don't go into school and say, now we're going to talk about wellness. Everything we should do should be tied to wealth, wellness, and I'm getting hungry, wellness and the health of every child. And it should be interconnected. It shouldn't be, we're now doing, MTSS. All of it should come together. And I'm seeing this in more places now start to happen. Literacy is, to me, number one focus. We got to be all in on that. We got to line it up to such a powerful shared vision that everybody is on board. Everybody understands it. Every association is doing it, modeling it, having speakers to come in that are national on science of reading. Everybody should be focused on that and ensuring it happens. And then we're looking at all the barriers within that. I am a big supporter of graduation, and we should be well over 90% as a state. And I would look at everything I could do to do what I've done in my career to get us over that number for all students, special education students, students that have a lot of odds against them. I know we pulled out a few of them today. To me, extremely, extremely critical. I also have looked at post-secondary. So if we looked at kids as assets and believed that every child could go to college, what are the things that we could do even more to make that happen? What's in the student day that might be harder for them to go job share, right? We have problems with that. We can't even get kids out to do internships, job sharing because of certification and reporting and such. Places I've worked, I would have this vision as a spokesperson is that all students have to be able to have this amazing career, amazing future, just like our own children. And how do we instill that to make sure it happens? And how are we messaging that right now? And truancy, to me, is the crisis. Because as we look at all of these goals, if a student is not in school, how can they be successful in any of these? And I would say as a state, as our population starts to get smaller, our pipeline of talent is getting smaller. So with the chamber, we talk about, and businesses, how do we come alongside each other and ensure more of our kids are graduating? How can you help us with the barriers so we can get you more talent? How can we ensure that every child graduates and they have a path forward, a dream to their success? You know, when you've done it and felt it and worked across the state and seen it done, you want it to be like that everywhere. And that's what I would instill with the staff. And you've got great momentum in literacy. We have great momentum in mathematics. We continue those things, and we ensure kids are well, they're engaged, they're healthy. We wrap all those things around it. We don't isolate them. We put them all together. And I believe we will have much better outcomes that we can start to celebrate. I do appreciate the reports that come out, though. You got good metrics. I would say there's opportunity maybe to refine these, relook at them. You've had these for a long time. Get your stakeholders. You have an amazing profile. See what people say, what we could do better together, right? There's opportunity in doing that.
The next question is a self-reflection. How would you ultimately establish your credibility to be the leader of public education in our state?
I would lead with humility. I would come to people asking them to help. It's a huge lift where we're at. Everywhere I've gone, I've built those relationships where people felt they could lean in and help and support moving us forward. My history, my evolution to even be in this room came about by style leadership I have, being visionary, inclusive, a champion for those that have no voice. The key would be making sure they're in the room with me and they feel confident that I have their back as well. I want every classroom to have the most talented teacher. We have to get that back. There are ISDs who tell me that the years of staff, their average years, maybe 6 or 7, when at one time we had staff that was more senior with 20 years and great experiences and background. And we have to be a champion for public ed. We have to lift our teachers up even more. And by listening and building those relationships and focusing on the very best and using the strategic plan as a guide and having your support will ensure that that happens. I believe it will.
Okay, please share with us your experience in dealing with the IDEA federal legislation as it relates to requirements that are mandated not only for the state, but also for ISDs, RESAs, and local districts. Please share with us how you would work with parents, students, administrators, and staff as challenges arise with interpretation and implementation of federal and state requirements. Additionally, please share any examples you have regarding controversial interpretations regarding students with disabilities that you have been able to assist in solving.
Well, I've shared earlier, as an ISD superintendent, we had the center-based programs, kindergarten through 12th grade, and also early on programming. Worked really closely with the department on a number of those factors that have come along. We've been very successful. I would say one of the toughest ones we're dealing with now is seclusion and restraint, and really trying to ensure the best practices as meeting, the law. What we've been able to do is this last year is have a seclusion and restraint summit where we came in and we talked about places that were doing the very best practices to ensure not that we're just meeting the law, but we were creating safer environments for the students and the staff members. That work is a real hot point right now because parents and teachers really see a need for us to do better with students with disabilities that have these very high needs. I think what it would be incredibly powerful, and we're doing this now with the department, with our special ed network, is working more hand in hand on how we can solve some of these problems that have existed for some time. People in the department have been very open to work on these topics, and we've had some great success. But they're so complex, and we're at different places. Case in point, we have long-term subs in special education classrooms. So how do we ensure working together that the department, the ISDs can come along, districts and ISD programs to ensure that we're meeting the law? So while we're talking about the requirements, there are some really underlying problems that we have to start to address, like having a certified teacher in those classrooms, ensuring that all the professional development is being completed and meets the standard. And I really believe we're going in the right track with this with the department. I think we can even do more. They've been great and they've been very responsive, but we have a long way to move in some regards. Seclusion restraint, though, there are some places in the state that are doing a phenomenal job. And one of the things that we've been working on as an association is how can we replicate these strong models across the state? And one of the things I believe, given this opportunity, I would work to connect more of these individuals and programs and have them tell their story, tell their compelling story of what it can become if we work together for the betterment of students. This is a really difficult topic, and everywhere I've worked on, I've seen when it changes, and a lot of it is moving past the folklore, right? Moving past the past and looking at what's happening now. It's innovative, that's coming along, that's showing strong gains. And there's a number of places in Michigan that are doing that with a lot of challenges. And I think we need to look at, in this role, how do we replicate that? How do we come alongside it? And how does the network and the branch of these two ISDs and the department work even better together? And working in it these last 3 years in a different capacity, like I said, I see the state so much differently than I did as a local or as an ISD soup. I see it so differently from where the resources are and where they're not. And I will tell you, there are ISD leaders, they work across geographic lines. They help each other every single day. They problem solve. So we need to lean into that space even more with the department, hand in hand.
There's a quick follow-up, important one.
A follow-up that we're asking every candidate regarding MARS rules, and I'm glad that you've acknowledged that special education services in Michigan need to improve significantly. We are one of the states, first of its kind in 27 years, that is being investigated for not providing adequate compensatory services to our special education students. Historically, MARS rules, Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, which comes with that federal compliance portion, every state has to write these rules, were approved by the State Board of Education. Former Governor John Engler removed the approval of MARS rules from the State Board of Education during his tenure. And not that I think he saw this coming, that's an aside, but this has proven to be disastrous long-term in the provision of special education services for Michigan students. Would you commit to helping to return the approval of MARS rules to the State Board of Education?
Could you give me a little bit more on the long-term? Talk about that just a little bit within your question. Can you
Sure,
do that?
being the only state
Yeah.
in America.
Just talk a little bit more about, though, what you're seeing, your question.
Being investigated for not providing adequate compensatory special education services to our students in Michigan. One of the biggest issues that happened during COVID is that multiple different forms of guidances went out to various local school districts. When we think about what it looks like to provide adequate special education services, it shouldn't matter which zip code you're in. You shouldn't be getting a different guidance based on what local school district you're in. So that was just one part of what went wrong during that time, but it also happens to be an umbrella of what it looks like for special education services in Michigan. And I would argue that's why the federal government said, okay, Michigan, you're unique. Let's have a conversation. And that is still actively happening right now. Anybody that comes to this table or who wants to be a part of the conversation should really take seriously that investigation and consider what parts of our policy, our process, our procedure, our history of governance is impacting that. And one of those things is MARS rules. It was removed from the State Board of Education via executive order. It's no longer something that we regularly entertain but should be entertaining. And I think every member of our board really cares about that. So, the question again is, would you commit to helping to return the approval of those MARS rules, any editing that's necessary to the State Board of Education?
Go ahead.
For clarification, in '96, Governor Engler passed an executive order that reduced the authority of the board. He did not remove MARS rules. MARS rules was then later revised a couple years after that. So you need the full context. It's not being displayed in the way that it should be. That's all I'm saying.
Reducing the authority led to MARS rules. Not.
He didn't reduce the rules.
Yeah.
He just reduced the authority of the board.
Correct. Yes.
MARS rules were
Very
still
much
in place.
related.
They were not removed.
Very much related.
If we can just keep to the very
Sure.
basic question, because I think we start pulling things in that will be unfair to the candidate. If I understand the importance of a question around IDEA and making sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our children, and if we could just ask the question so we get straight to the point, so we're not misleading.
Would you commit to helping to return the authority to the State Board of Education so that they can be the body, the constitutional elected body that we are in the state of Michigan, in approval of MARS rules?
Currently, that authority is with the state superintendent. Is that right?
ISDs
For the
typically.
ISDs.
Another COVID flashback, right? Let's just talk about during that time. I'm going to give you perception from the front line. So nobody knew what we were facing at that time. Nobody knew. And the safety of our most vulnerable special ed needs students would not to be put them in the room and group them at that time. I saw that firsthand. I saw what happened in our county. And so I wouldn't try to make that a symbol of what everything would maybe look like. And I don't know if that was your intent with the question, but the more we can streamline whatever that authority is, what people need to do, and then we're working together and it's very clear. I could tell you ISDs would say the messaging has to be much more aligned. We're working on the same rules, we're following those rules, and we have the resources to meet them. Having a niece who has special needs who graduated, I fully know well the importance of having a strong teacher and a sound plan in front of them. And if there's violations of that plan, I would have been her advocate to ensure that we fix those things, right? But the reality of that time, there was too many unknowns to say what it would be. Now, authority, I know there's legal conversations right now in this area, so it's really hard for me to make a comment about who would hold authority right now. I know it's being discussed with the Fed level and such. But let me just say, I think for clarity, whatever we align together and that we file to ensure and support, there has to be checks and balances, whether it's here or it's somewhere. It has to be because we don't want a situation where a student is not getting the support necessary for them to be successful and to have a good life when they complete with us, no matter what level they are at, right? So that assurance is to ensure we follow those processes and rules. If it makes more sense that MDE is going to do that, or if that was what the board wanted to advocate for as a full board, I would take note of that and do my very best to support that. Most importantly, going back to if you're going to take that on, ensuring you have the resources to deliver on it again. Because if you're thin now and you're going to take another a large task on, you want to ensure that you have the people and the staffing to make it work. So I know you have expertise here. I've worked with a few of them on this topic. I have people in the field who have many years in special education that could easily come alongside and say, okay, how would we make this work for our kids first? Start there, then you decide who's going to have that over control of it, and then make sure all the resources are provided that we can deliver on that. But I don't have that deep of history like you just shared, and I don't want to step in something with a commitment as a yes, no, unless I have more information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Severson, for all that you do for our children in this state, and for applying for this position. you will hear from HYA. Tomorrow we will finalize this portion of our interviews, and then you will hear from them as far as what are your next steps, if there are next steps.
Sure.
And so that concludes. It looks like you might, do you have any questions? I
one
know that you
question.
started, yes.
One question, and first off, it's an honor to be here. I'm very humble. I've watched some of your meetings. I've read your notes, your minutes. You have an incredibly important job. So I ask, don't lose sight of our kids. Keep doing what you're doing. Be focused. We're going to go through some transitions in the next few years. It's going to need a strong board to champion that. My question to all of you, and you might not be able to answer this, but the leadership profile mentions that one of the top 10 priorities for the next superintendent is to revisit and refocus the strategic plan and reduce or refine goals in collaboration with the board to drive clearer progress on student achievement. Given the many urgent priorities identified by stakeholders, from literacy and equitable funding to student wellness and CTE, how would you, as a board, define success for the next superintendent's first 2 years? Specifically, what 2 to 3 key goals from the top 10 strategic education plan would you most want to see measurable and sustained progress on, even at the potential expense of other goals? And so I ask you that with a focus of creating a shared vision, gathering all voices to solve and challenge all the challenges so all children can succeed. And you might not be able to answer that, but I got that from the profile as a real gold nugget.
So you will leave us something to reflect upon. What I will say is that the late Brian Whiston started us on this strategic planning and strategic top 10 and 10 goals that were Dr. Rice came in and refined those and brought us from the 10,000 foot level and put some strategies around. And we would expect and give room for the next person who comes into this position to be able to put their spin, for lack of a better word, but their thoughts and their vision on that strategic goal. And whoever comes into this position, of course, would have conversation with board members, and we would be reflecting on what we've learned, what we've gleaned, and what we want to see. And of course, with great input from our broad stakeholders, parents and children, and educators first in mind. So that is something we will be thinking about. Thank you for leaving us with that. But whomever comes in this space, in this position, sits in this seat, would have that freedom and liberty to help us to determine that. But thank you so much again. And you again will hear from HYA as to the next steps and how we're moving forward. And at this time, the board will recess for lunch and we will come back together at 1:45 p.m. Thank you so much, Dr. Severson. Thank you.